I quit Google to pursue Equalution full time, which was probably, now looking back, one of the best decisions I've ever made. Launching the app was probably the most monumental part of the whole journey. We had 987% revenue growth with the introduction of the app. Yes, it got a lot busier. People were raving online. They were just singing our praises. So it was a really exciting time.
Jade Spooner. From dropping out of law school to then building one of Australia's fastest growing nutrition companies, Equalution, Jade Spooner's journey is anything but conventional.
I got out of bed and I knew exactly what I was doing was my sole purpose, until one day it just wasn't. And I just remember having a moment where I was sitting on a rock and I just was looking out and I just had this thought in my head, you have to leave. I'd never said that to myself before, but I knew that it was time to go.
Jade Spooner, welcome to the House Story.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to maybe dive through your background, and more specifically, I want to dive back to your childhood. So maybe you can tell me about young Jade.
Okay. It's funny you say that because I was obviously just telling you guys that we sadly lost my grandfather last week, and now we've been going through a lot of home movies and things like that. So it's been a good time to ask me about my childhood because I've actually seen that little girl on TV going through some of the home movies and whatnot. But I think growing up, I had a fairly, I would say, normal childhood. I did come from a family of divorce. So my parents, when I was 10, separated. And I think that sort of taught me a lot about, resilience, also independence as well. I actually didn't live with either of them after that. I went and lived with my grandma just because my dad was living there, and then he later moved out. And so I stayed with my grandma. So I was raised by my grandma for about 6 years or so. And, that obviously teaches you a lot. I was really, really independent. And I think that was where it was instilled in me, the importance of doing something with yourself and making something of yourself. So that was quite young that I had that vision and that dream for myself, that I always sort of envisioned that the area that I lived in, I'd get out of. Not that it was bad or anything like that, but I just felt like it was closed in, like a little box. And so I moved to the city when I was really young and started a business also really young.
Wow. And did you do uni, anything like that?
I did. I actually started a law degree, and so technically today I'm 4/5 of a lawyer.
Okay.
And and a dropout. But so I started. I wanted to do law, and I was pretty confident that I was going to have my own law firm one day, and I was fairly passionate about law. And so I enrolled in University of Wollongong, and then really quickly realised that wasn't for me. I actually got a job opportunity with Google pretty sort of late into my degree, and to me that was a good enough reason to leave. So I ended up deferring, and I took the job at Google, and obviously never looked back, even though my dad still asks me to this day, you ever going to go back and finish that law degree? I'm like, I think that's behind me now.
And why law? Why did you choose law at the time?
I don't know. I think I was academic, but I wasn't math or science gifted. So I feel like it was really the natural progression from someone that was good with literacy and things like that. I think it was what a lot of people did back then when, you weren't going to be a doctor or an engineer or something like that. It was sort of like, okay, well, law it is. And so, I felt like it was something that I was going to be, I was in the debating team at school and whatnot. I thought, oh, sure, it must be similar. So I enrolled in law.
Okay. And what did you end up doing at Google? How did that all happen?
So I actually got that job from my co-founder. And even though it sounds really special to work there, it was, but I wasn't doing any sort of high up executive role or anything like that. I actually was selling space for Google AdWords. So I basically used to pitch to businesses on, right budget spends and right strategies for the Google AdWords space. So I was essentially a salesperson, and I was really good at it.
Yeah. I was going to say, so were you pretty competitive?
Yes, always have been. I've always had that streak where if I wanted to do something, I wanted to be the best at it. And if I'm not going to be the best, I probably won't give it a go. Yeah.
And so how long were you with Google?
I wasn't with Google for very long because that's when I'd started my business Equalution. And that was on the side to Google, and I quit Google to pursue Equalution full time, which was probably, now looking back, one of the best decisions I've ever made. Yeah. And so I wasn't with Google for this is a long time ago. I was very young, 21, 22. I wouldn't have been with Google for any more than a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so what made you start a business? Where did you possibly think just I'm gonna go for it?
Yeah, so I think it was like a lot of passionate founders in that saw a problem, experienced a problem, saw a problem in the market and created a solution for it. So I was about early 20s when I first started competing in bodybuilding shows. Feels like many moons ago now, a whole nother lifetime ago. But I did fitness model competitions with my co-founder. We were originally gym partners. We actually went to high school together, but we trained, day in, day out at the gym and just decided that we wanted to take it to the next level. So we enrolled in a fitness model competition, and we sort of did it the way that everyone did at the time, which was chicken, broccoli, fish, asparagus, egg whites, and that's about it. And we stepped on stage and we just sort of thought we weren't completely happy with what we brought to stage, but did all the things and just thought there must be something else. Well, I think we must be missing something. So we ended up, after we had done a show and a prep under those methods, we went and looked for more answers. So we found this guy who lives actually quite locally to where we grew up, and he was apparently giving his clients chocolate and ice cream and pizza and pasta, and they were eating carbs and they were still losing weight. So we really quickly signed up with him and learnt from him. And he was actually one of the founding partners of Equalution as well, because how it all started was he was giving us his clients' numbers and we were creating the meal plans. He saw that we loved doing what we were doing in sort of trying to, it was like nutrition Tetris. It was like you got the numbers and then you try and meet it with the foods that someone liked and whatnot. And he saw that we had a bit of a passion for it. So he asked us to, do his clients. And then we pitched a business idea to him. We said, well, why don't the three of us do this? And you give it our all, and we did.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so how did you go about getting a first client? Was it just a matter of calling a book of numbers that he gave to you? Or?
Well, basically he at the time was working in a supplement store. So he was sort of engaging with people that were our target market on a day in, day out basis. And then we were sort of doing our own thing behind the scenes in regards to, sort of cultivating testimonials and before and afters and whatnot. And we were doing a lot of friends and family for free. So that's sort of how we started. But people kind of had no problem paying for what we were offering. It was such a attractive proposal. Fat loss is an industry and health and wellness is an industry that I don't think is going anywhere. So the enthusiasm for purchasing was never something that, we never had to die hard and convince people to do it.
And so at what point did you guys hit a key milestone? Like, was there any moment where you hit a specific revenue target or employee target and you were like, this is going to work?
Yeah, I mean, the validation was always there from day one. And I think that was a really big upside to just keep on keeping on sort of thing. It was like people were just singing our praises and they were telling their friends. And, in the midst of that, we were cultivating a community, it seems. So I feel like there was a lot of validation. We only had to, if we ever had a hard day, we just look at, how far we'd come from even just, forming the business. And there was always little wins along the way that showed to us that we were onto something, not to mention the fact that we were our own first clients and hugely believed in what we were doing. Second to that, I think, really experiencing the problem, you also experience the thorough need that there's something needs to be done about it, So there was a lot of things that validated pressing forward with this. And then the wins, I think, as the momentum continued, just became greater. So the first thing that happened that I think was a key milestone was us going to Jonathan, which was our first partner, and sort of saying we want to take this full time. So this is when we're still at Google. And he said, well, I don't really want to write meal plans for the rest of my life. So you guys go do your thing. And we're still friends with him to this day. So that was all well and good. And he sort of gave us, the rights to be able to go out and continue to grow this, which was really fantastic. So it was just the two of us and this kind of big dream. And then we decided that we wanted to build an app, sort of thinking about, I guess, the manual labor that was involved in tailoring a meal plan to each individual, chuck the support in on that as well. And we sort of understood really quickly for X amount of clients that we grow, we're going to need X amount of coaches. This thing could just be mammoth from like a labor perspective. But also life could be a lot easier for us if we created some sort of technology. So we decided to build a mobile app and did what no founder would do and took a one-way ticket to Silicon Valley to try and figure that out. And that was a big, that's a good one for the memory books. But we didn't achieve much over there, only that we kind of figured out that how to do this. So we heard we went to this thing called the Startup Grind, and we heard from a lot of founders, Twitter, Lyft, Google, ClassPass, like a lot of big companies that were in the technology space.
Yep.
And a lot of them were making reference to, we started in an accelerator program. A lot of them were like Y Combinator, etc. So we came back and we enrolled in a accelerator program at Sydney University. It was called Incubate. And we were sort of put in touch with the right mentors, and what sort of started as like, how the hell are we going to build an app, sort of turned into, okay, I think we've got a few contacts to kind of make this happen. We had a couple of failed attempts, and then we found a company that was able to build the product for us. But meanwhile, in order to bootstrap that, we just continued to build the business, and it was all about, getting, I think the membership numbers increasing was really, from a strategic perspective, what made that growth and reinvestment possible. But we were really just doing what we were really good at and loved. That was the reality of it. So I think, your first couple of staff members are always a real achievement. There's a few things that's kind of come to mind, but launching the app was probably the most monumental part of the whole journey, because from a growth perspective, it completely changed the trajectory of the business. We had 987% revenue growth with the introduction of the app. So
Gee whiz.
yeah, it was
Got busier.
Yes, it got a lot busier and people were raving online. They were just singing our praises. So it was a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So through that process, was it you that was looking after the app, or like how did you separate roles with your two partners?
One partner. So at that this time we'd sort of gone our separate ways, and it was just my co-founder and myself.
Yep.
And we operated really well in terms of, we both had our own territories. So mine was branding, marketing, sales, and then hers was more the strategic numbers side of the client's journey, which then later turned into, operations, technology, finances. So we were very distinctly different, and I think that's what worked really well in the partnership. She always used to joke that I used to get the clients and she used to get them the result.
Yes.
So it was like a really good partnership in that sense.
It's hard to find a good partnership, isn't it?
Totally. And, I look back on my business journey, and even though I've exited the company, and obviously with that exit comes a point where, what we want is not the same thing anymore, which is, really indifferent considering you've wanted the same thing for 8 years, but there's a point that's come where I've wanted to leave and she wants to stay. Even though that's how the cookie crumbled in the end, whilst we worked together really well. And like, you look at the story and it's like, that worked because those two people joined forces, So I'm really grateful for that, and, respect that part of the partnership in our journey as being really the whole driver.
Did you have to sit down and go, this is my role, this is your role, or did it just naturally fit?
Naturally fit and just naturally worked. Yeah, it did.
And take me back to maybe a moment when you were growing that business where you had a really big challenge and how you dealt with it. Like, is there any one particular thing that you think of?
I think professionally, in the actual company, scaling was always really tricky. I mean, especially considering if I was to have had the same problems now, having worked with over 150 startups, scale-ups, etc., I'd be more well equipped to deal with those things today. But as a mid-20-year-old, making millions a year in revenue and dealing with, tens of staff, etc., it's a very different kettle of fish. So I think what I saw as problems and challenges back then, me today would view very differently. But I always found, just growth, teething issues. It's like, it's the classic saying, more money, more problems. You grow, and then with that comes great responsibility and, greater opportunity cost and upsides and downsides, etc. So I think my answer back then would have probably been different to now. But back then I would just say the scaling side of things, going from a team of 10 working in this fun environment to like every minute counts, every dollar is accounted for, because you're working with, people that are smarter than you, that are helping you and guiding you, etc. And even technology as an investment, when we were super young, investing X, Y, and Z into building an app was neither here nor there. But then you get a little bit older, I was moving towards my late 20s and I'm like, but maybe it's the time that we start investing in property and building personal wealth and buying a house. And it's like, you're just a bit more torn,
So do you think there was some magic in the naivety?
Yes. Yeah, without a doubt. Even now, doing this a second time round, I'm currently building a business management solution for online coaches. And the thoughts that I have now, I'm often sort of, I have to kind of slap them out of me because I can feel a bit of conservatism coming through. And that was not the same girl that was able to build Equalution, So I try and step into that character a little bit more. But when you're older, you're wiser and, you've got a bit more of a diversification mindset, like whereas I once upon a time had all my eggs in one basket. Now I sort of think about multiple streams of income and, what that can do and an investment portfolio, etc. Whereas 22-year-old Jade was not thinking like that, So yeah, I think the naivety is a really powerful thing.
Do you have any advice that you would give to young Jade?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Okay.
But also, it was the best. You can't have any regrets. It's just such a funny thing. You look back and it's like, God, wouldn't change a thing, but also would change a few things. That sort of classic thing. Yeah, I think I wish I was a little bit smarter with my money back then because I should have used Equalution as a tool rather than it was my whole identity, life, personal wealth, etc., all funneled into that one business.
What do you mean as a tool? Like
leverage, if you're an entrepreneur, the first business you have is probably not going to be your last. I didn't have that mindset back then. You know what I mean? So I think using it from a perspective of, understanding the best time to leave and, building personal wealth on the side and sort of stepping more into this character of, helping startups, creating venture opportunities, etc. If I would have grasped that, maybe it would have distracted me from the big picture. Who knows? But I feel, I think having a bit more of a perspective of those various opportunities, not just the one thing that I was working on, might have been good. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's really hard to say. Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah. It's so hard looking back to just try to work out if I'd have done this, would it still have worked out or would it not have worked out?
Yeah. I think it's just when there's a lot of information out there about how to start a business, but I think there's few people who talk about when it's time to leave, and there is a time. There is I'd be lying if I said that even some of the most passionate entrepreneurs are not going to at one point, just wrap things up, like for either a next chapter or to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Like at some point in time, it will end. And I just think that there's not a lot of understanding about what to do during that time or preparing for it.
When should I wrap up? Or what warning signs should I look for to know when?
It's not even when it's going bad. It's I think sometimes if you think about things from a really strategic perspective and a really commercial perspective, it's sometimes when they're going the best. This morning, for example, I just shared on my Instagram story, Elf just rode Hailey Bieber's beauty company for $1 billion. I guarantee she's not done. She's probably got so much more work to do, but she's opened herself up to an opportunity to do that at a bigger scale and still have a finger on the pulse through strategic advisory and being the creative director or whatever. I think she's head of innovation or something like that, and an exit can look like that as well. So I think sometimes it's not necessarily about when things are falling apart, but it's when it's really coming together.
Do you mind me asking, how did you guys go about deciding that it was time to then exit?
So I only exited. So my co-founder still runs the business to this day. And I guess this is probably what I was saying in terms of challenges being professionally. My personal challenge, the biggest personal challenge that I've had in my business journey was being in this place of not being able to articulate how I was feeling, but just knowing that I wasn't in the right place at that time. And that was really unusual considering I was such a visionary and I got out of bed and I knew exactly what I was doing was my sole purpose until one day it just wasn't. And I didn't really know how that looked because, like I said, there's a lot out there about how to start a business. There's not a lot about what I was experiencing was the time was up. My time was up. You know, I had got it to a point that I was so proud of, and it was at its peak when I decided to leave, and I just didn't really know kind of what to do with that, if that makes sense. But I think the first thing I did was I took annual leave. I took all my leave that I had just to figure it out. And I remember on my first day, I went for I used to live on the beach in Coogee, and I did the coastal walk. And I just remember like having a moment where I was sitting on a rock and I just was looking out, and I just had this thought in my head, like, you have to leave. I'd never said that to myself before, but I knew that it was time to go. And that was really scary because it's like, geez, what the hell does this look like from here on in, you know? But obviously getting the right advisory and the right help, I think, you know, having the company valued and then trying to find the right buyer, the process began. But the first thing is just obviously that realization. So it was really tricky for us to navigate because obviously one was like, no, and then one was like, I'm done. So, you know, it was a tricky time.
Could I ask a big favor? If you've taken any value out of this episode, please like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference for us.
Is there advice you'd give to someone else that's maybe going through that process right now that might be sitting there thinking, you know, this isn't right for me, or I should move on, or has that negative self-talk? I mean, I think throughout the journey you can have a lot of negative self-talk anyway, but you know, if you have that moment of self-realization where it's like, I should probably move on. Yeah. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, definitely find someone that has done it and sit down with them and just pick their brains and just lay it all on the table, exactly what you're feeling, and really understand that there's two components to this situation. There's a commercial side that you have to be really mindful of. Like, yes, it's not all about the money, but just understand how much you've put into this to get it to this point and what its true value is. So it's not just about like, I don't care what I get, I'm up and leaving, I'm starting a new chapter. It's like that could be worth something and you need to maximize its value. And then the other side is, you know, mental health, your personal happiness, your fulfillment, it's everything. So, you know, you have to also balance that in with the fact that this is a commercial transaction, or maybe it's not worth anything, but you need to still take the steps to make sure, you know, that you're taking the right path essentially.
So when did you wrap up with Equalution?
So the day I left the business, which was end of 2021, was not the day that I formally exited. So I left the business at the end of 2021 and I was bought out in April of last year.
Okay, gotcha.
So it was a couple of years in between.
Yeah. And so how do you find, I mean, if that business would have been your whole life, your whole purpose, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
How do you find purpose outside of that? Like, what did you do? Just wake up one morning and go, I've got all this time.
It was so tricky. I didn't actually have a lot of time. I just filled that really quickly. So I kept working. I remember really quickly as soon as, you know, I started putting a lot of content, Q&As, things like that on my Instagram. There was a lot of people that would DM me like, are you consulting? That's kind of what they called it. Then I guess there's a lot of business coaches and things like that now, but a lot of people were reaching out, you know, are you doing consulting? Do you do one-on-one sessions? All that kind of stuff. So I really quickly formed, you know, another service and offer after leaving the business. So I was never without work, so to speak. I've done a few things in between. I started an agency. I took a CMO role with a big supplement company. Like, I've done various things that I always knew were not permanent, but it was really just about discovery post-exit, because I was definitely one of those people who had an identity tied to my business, not to mention it filled 24/7 of my day, you know, so it was a really difficult thing to try and find myself. But in saying that too, I left I think my last day of work at my company was in May, and I met my now husband in November. So that was a really small window of just navigating things on my own before I was in another partnership that took kind of a different form, and I had so much support, and I feel truly like for once I was really enjoying my life. Like I feel as though I loved my business and I loved the purpose that I had from it, and I loved the growth of it. Clearly, I've done so many things that are like, you know, very similar since. I'm obviously a startup girl. I love it. But I actually started to squeeze the most out of life when I fell in love, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You sound like you're getting a bit emotional about that.
Oh, I mean, like, it's crazy because you don't really look back at, your journey like we do when, we have these sorts of chats, and it just kind of takes you right back. And I do remember just being quite lost at the time. Exiting is a really tricky thing, and I don't think it's for the faint-hearted. But I was definitely really lost. And to be honest with you, have only really just started to find, I can confidently say what I want to do with my life now, where there was a big chunk of time where I just really wasn't sure. And you can see that in my history. I've done so many different things. And I can admit at the time I knew none of them were for forever. But I just thought it was really important that I experienced and I was challenged and I learnt things, and I definitely wouldn't be the business person I am today without those experiences. If I'd only had Equalution, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I feel that.
Yeah.
Stunted growth.
Yeah. I feel like so many people go through their 20s looking for purpose, and you can get caught up in a business that takes you to your 30s, and then all of a sudden you haven't maybe had that chance to do all that self-discovery, and then you hit a point where all of a sudden you've got time, and you're like, oh, okay, this is who I am, or I get the opportunity to go and try other things.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm one of 5 kids, and my youngest brother, we're 10 years apart. And he's sort of in his early 20s now, and he obviously sees his older siblings. My brother below me, he's a real estate agent. He owns his own real estate agency. He's got like 20 odd staff. He's doing really, really great. And he obviously sees my littlest brother, his older siblings, and, killing it and whatever. And it's like, dude, there's 10 years between you and me. That's so much time. So much can happen. And even he's at a point now where he's thinking about what his future looks like. And I've even said, just try so many things. Try heaps. Some things are going to work. Some things are not. Some things will teach you things. Some things you'll feel like are a waste of time, but truly nothing is. You know what I mean? So just use your time and try a lot of things.
Yeah, I hear it from a lot of young people quite often. I mean, I'm young, but I hear it from a lot of other young people that they really struggle when schooling, especially now. I feel like it's louder than it was when I finished school.
Yeah, definitely.
Of people just struggling with that, what am I going to do next, but also struggling with the pressure of like, well, all these people that I know and around me are all doing these big, great things.
Yeah.
I just want to go to uni, or I just want to do this thing.
Yeah, it's the art of comparison. And I even notice with myself, like you have to listen to what's good for you and what essentially isn't. Like whenever I'm in building mode, which right now I am, as I mentioned, I'm building a software, and I truly shut out the noise. Like I'm not on social media a lot. I don't put a lot out there. I actually had someone in my industry reach out to me who knew that I was building this and say, is it still on? I'm like, it's still on, but I don't put it all out there because I like to head down, bum up, and just solely focus on this. And, that I think you've got to listen to what's good for you. I don't find social media a good use of time when things are in building mode. So, I think the art of comparison can be quite ugly.
If you don't mind me asking, you said that you found your partner
Yes.
quite quickly after the exit.
Yep.
Why do you think that happened so quickly in such a short period of time compared to the many years before that? Was Jade a different person, or was Jade's mind just there, or how did that happen?
Yeah, 100%. I think, I'm a big believer in everything happens at the right time, exactly as it's meant to. And if I look at, who I was during the Equalution period of time, I always was a hopeless romantic, and I always wanted to find someone to share my life with. I knew that was the missing link. But if I'm honest with myself, I probably wasn't, putting myself in the right environment to be able to, make that happen, whether that be, working too much or, not being emotionally available. That's also another thing. Or just dating the wrong people. But I mean, that's a whole other thing that my mum could tell you all about, because she said to me at one point, she even said in my wedding speech, she goes, we didn't think this day was going to happen at one point. But anyhow, I just think that I was happy after I left. I was definitely stressed. It was a really stressful time. It, sucks the life out of you going through something like that, between DD to finding a buyer to, corresponding with lawyers. It is physically, emotionally, and financially draining. But in saying that, I was at peace. And I think that says a lot for the energy that you then attract from the outside in. And I remember like going through sort of a end of a situationship and just thinking, I'm not doing that again. Like I want to build my life with someone. And I think I was ready. So I think that's why he came around when he did.
Is there, for other business owners that are maybe in a situation where they're flat out with work and maybe that's something that's important to them? Do you have any advice?
It's funny, I was listening to a podcast. One of my favorite female entrepreneurs is Emma Grede, who founded Skims Good American. I think she's a fantastic businesswoman. And I actually was listening to her talk on the Diary of a CEO about balance, and that she believes that there's a time and place for everything, to go all in. And she really believes on going all in. And I think the biggest thing that I can say in agreement with that is that I think that there is a time for going all in with your business, which does mean sacrifice, which means that sometimes you can see your social life diminish. You can, be closed off to opportunities of love and whatnot. And I think in those moments, it's all just about mindset, understanding that this isn't permanent. This is just a moment, and to have patience and a trust in the universe or God or whatever you believe in, that when it's meant to happen, it will happen. But then also knowing when to pull the handbrake on that time and say, I've played my part, I've done the build, or I've done the heavy lifting. It's time to, win some life back. Because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, I lost my grandfather last week. He was a big family man. And, you watch someone go through those final weeks of life and it, like, nothing else matters, as cliche as that sounds. So I just think that, if you want to double down on your business, I'm the biggest advocate for that. And I think it's totally necessary to build something that's great, but then also to understand that that can't continue forever, or it can. And you could be Elon Musk, who has 14 children and doesn't see them, So it's like, I mean, there's an opportunity cost if you make it your whole existence.
You advise a lot of businesses now, advise and invest in a lot of businesses now. What are common mistakes that you see?
I think sometimes it really comes down to the founder and what the leadership looks like and what the energy of the founder entails in terms of, is this their whole life? Are they using this as a cash cow? Where do they want to take this? What is the ceiling and the limitations that they are putting on this business? So I think a really great founder makes a really great business. So I think that's something that's, if we're talking about the opposite side, I think that's something that is done well. I think in terms of mistakes, just not doing the work, to be honest with you. There's a lot that needs to be done when building a business and building a brand. And you might not be the jack of all trades in terms of, maybe you're not the person that shows up on social media, but instead invest in the community that will do that on your behalf. So I think it's just really missed opportunities from cutting corners or not doing the work. It's funny because, I do believe, I don't want to sound old fashioned, and, at 33, like, I know everything. I still have a lot to learn, but I also, through knowing a lot of older people, think a bit old school in the sense that I don't think they make them like they used to, where I think there's a lot of the older generation that just knew hustle like we don't know it. And I'm a big believer in the results are in the work you're not doing, probably.
Yeah, that's really valuable. I don't think a lot of people hear that and maybe understand it, but I think certainly a belief that I've got is that the magic is in the work that you're not doing. And so I often try to take the most difficult thing in my day and do it first.
Do it first, eat the frog. Yeah.
Because otherwise it just never somehow magically everything else fills my time except for that.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I actually achieve today aside from 100 emails or whatever else?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Working in the business and working on the business is something that needs to be balanced really nicely, because at the start you don't necessarily have the resources to be able to, delegate quite optimally, but I definitely think that you need to be spending time working on it as well as in it.
A lot of founders, I've spoken to a lot of founders now on this, and I'm sure you have too. How do you go about finding out that you're the bottleneck and then getting past that?
I think the really great founders that I have had the privilege to work with have an amazing self-awareness. And I think a lot of the honesty with yourself is probably going to be the root cause to finding great solutions. So, I did a really good exercise with a mentor years and years ago, and he was phenomenal. He built a huge company that he exited for hundreds of millions in the health and fitness space. And he sort of came in and helped us with our growth phase and our scaling phase. He had my co-founder and I sit down and write pretty much every problem that we're experiencing in the business on Post-it notes. So by the end of, 20, 30 minutes, we had dozens and dozens of Post-it notes. And then he got them all with us, and then we categorized them into areas of the business. So there was people and culture, there was operations, there was product, there was marketing, there was finances. And we dropped all the Post-it notes into their relevant categories. And it kind of allows you to do this sort of bird's eye view of, shit, what's the area that we're really falling short in at the moment? Where are most of our problems sitting? And it allowed us to kind of make plans for each of those parts of the business to be able to resolve them. It's something that I still do with my clients to this day, something that I do when I'm feeling stuck. And I find that my downfalls are often seen in those areas. I wear a lot of hats in what I do, but I'm largely branding, marketing, sales focused, just like I always have been, and I fall short in budget, forecasting, all that kind of stuff. So I always call on, financial help to be able to advise accordingly. And I can always see that. So I think whenever you're creating, these abilities to be able to see your issues, it sort of helps to be able to do exercises like that where you can see them holistically.
That's great.
Yeah.
And now you're building another business.
Yeah.
What do you see the role of AI playing in tech?
Oh, it's massive. It's really driving my whole next product. I think I'm really sort of a similar school of thought that a lot of people are now, where it's not using AI and thinking it works against us, but rather working with it and seeing how we can use it to our competitive advantage. I even had a conversation. I work with a lot of online coaches. My dominant advisory market is online coaches that are sort of that 500K a year plus category. That's like sort of my sweet spot. And one online coach has a team of about 8 or 9 coaches underneath him. And he was sort of talking about, they're using ChatGPT for check-ins. I just don't want it to be too generic. I said, let's do some sort of workshop with the staff so they can adequately ask the right questions to be able to give a more humanized answer to their clients. So instead of saying you can't use ChatGPT for your check-ins and your support, how can we prompt it with the right questions as a collective to be able to give sufficient responses to clients so they don't feel like they're being spoken to by ChatGPT, So I'm a big believer in working with the tools rather than being against them.
Yeah, I think there's been a big shift. I feel like it's happened mostly this year, and people
Really
going
quick.
from, I think AI is going to take my job and I'm ready to do whatever, to, okay, this is a tool that I really need to use and actually is highly supportive of my role or my function.
Yeah, it's funny. I was literally having a conversation with my mum on the way here about having exited when I did ChatGPT and AI. I'm just not sure commercially what that would have looked like these days, So I think it's massive. It's changed a lot. And it will continue to change a lot as well.
Yeah, no, we're trying to embrace it as much as possible, and it's been amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any daily routines or activities that you do to keep yourself grounded or focused or operating at your best?
Yeah, I think the first part of the day is probably the most important. So I used to be a get up and train at 5 a.m. person. Now it's just when it works for me and when it works for my day. But I'm not someone that kind of like just sits around for those first couple of hours of the morning. I usually like to get up, go get a coffee and stuff. And I think just everything is really mindset relevant. I like listening to podcasts. I like considering what I'm grateful for. Not that I sit there and write it down or journal or anything like that. I'm sure that's a great practice for some people. It's not what I do, but I like to think that way and ask myself, what's cool about the day ahead and things like that. Just have a little bit of a moment to chat to yourself.
And what about when you were growing Equalution? Were there any moments where you were just pulling your hair out and you had a way of calming yourself? Or
yeah, I was an over exerciser.
Okay.
Yeah, at the most stressful of times,
it's a good outlet.
Yeah, ran marathons, half marathons, did challenges, 75 hard this and that, and all the things. I was just kind of, from a physical activity standpoint, I was always doing something. So I think that kept me sane, and it was my time. It was just for me. I love. I used to do Barry's classes, Barry's boot camp, which is obviously half tread, half floor. And you can't be on your phone. It's none of that. So I think that was quite powerful, just that hour of the day where it was just me and training and adrenaline and the red zone.
I love that.
Yeah.
Jade, you've had a very interesting journey. I think it's a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice you would just give to someone in general, looking back at your journey, that would be maybe meaningful or valuable to them? Maybe it's just a quote, or maybe it's just something that you think, I feel like someone needs to hear this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but have a punt, have a go, give it a red hot, and not everything is going to work out exactly as you want it to. Maybe it will be better. I think I'm a big believer in just giving everything a try. If you have that itch, scratch it. If it's starting a business, I've been thinking about this for a long time, just do it. I think that, and obviously really relevant to, having just lost Pop, but he always said family first always. That was his big thing, piece of advice that he used to say to our family. So no matter what I do in the future, no matter how engulfed I'll be in any project or whatnot, I think family is a massive factor. I hope that our house is always the open door house where my siblings can file in, and, I have just as close of a relationship with nieces and nephews as I do my own kids one day and all that kind of stuff. I think family is everything.
Do you have anybody that you feel like you couldn't have done everything you've done so far without?
Well, in my earlier business journey, my co-founder, because we were a dynamic duo, and now my partner, my husband, Matt, he's just honestly just like a saving grace in everything. He's always the calm before the storm. If I'm ever having, a hectic day or dealing with a lot of stress, he's just fantastic. Such a nice balance. Yeah.
Jade, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.